John Horgan is a ridiculous asshole that looks like a karate dad whose kids replaced his protein pills with Metamucil as a prank. Now, unless his mom listens to the show or you were at NECSS, I'm sure you have no idea who that is, but trust me, he's a primo jackass, and somehow he wound up on the speaker list at the Northeast Conference on Science and Skepticism. Very last speaker, tucked into the spot on the schedule where something like half of the attendees will already have left, and I'm sure he was all at 20 words into his talk before the organizing committee was regretting giving him even the honorable mention slot. Right, so the title of his talk was Skepticism, Hard versus Soft Targets, and that sounded interesting on its face, but as soon as he started talking, it was obvious where he was going. This was going to be one of those, I know you guys are all here because of X, Y, and Z, but fuck you, I care more about A, B, C, therefore you're doing it wrong type of tirades. Right, he starts off chastising the skeptical movement for being obsessed with soft targets like homeopathy and Bigfoot instead of zeroing in on the really important problems, i.e., his political positions. Now, for what it's worth, this was a 3-day skeptical conference, and he was the first speaker to bring up homeopathy or Bigfoot, but whatever. I'll grant him the point that those are two things that skeptics invest their efforts debunking, so he hadn't completely lost me at this point, but then he starts reeling off his hard targets, the things that we should be focused on instead, and this comes in the form of a fucking phalanx of straw men for 30 minutes while the audience just stares at him like his dick is hanging out. He rants a bit about how doctors do too many cancer screenings and that leads to negative health outcomes. And to his credit, that's almost certainly true. What made it so spectacularly stupid was the idea that skeptics don't talk about that, right? Everyone in the audience knew it since Dr. Stephen Novella of Skeptic's Guide to the Universe fame talks about that shit all the time. One of the most respected leaders of the skeptical movement and one that every single attendee of NECSS knows and loves has decried the overuse of cancer screenings for years. And this dumbass is standing there telling us about it like it's some new shit, like he just found the last piece of the Triforce or something. And while we're all still trying to process that, he starts going off on how modern medicine and the pharmaceutical companies are just trying to keep everybody sick so they can make more money. And then quick before he descends into full-blown jet fuel doesn't burn that hot territory, he cuts himself off with what he thought was a rhetorical question. He says, considering all that, can you blame people for turning to alternative medicine? And I say he thought it was rhetorical because I didn't hesitate to answer. I shouted out yes and threw him off his game a bit. The audience laughed a little bit. It's all the encouragement a heckling asshole like me needs. So then he starts going off on science. Just, in general. Science, all of it. And what's wrong with science? The fact that Lawrence Krauss's book, A Universe from Nothing, doesn't actually turn the world of physics on its head, of course. And how dare it not be the most influential book about physics in the history of the Earth? And if you're trying to wrap your head around why the fuck a person would say that, I'm sorry that I can't help you. I've been wondering the same thing for days now. And then he starts going off on Ray Kurzweil, the guy who thinks he can live 1,000 years if he takes 800 vitamins a day and says we're a decade away from synthetic immortality. So for a second, I thought maybe he was going to save his talk after all, right? I mean, we can all get behind thrashing Ray Kurzweil, except for the whole way he framed it was, and all you guys think Ray Kurzweil is a genius and you listen to everything he says and you all sacrifice your firstborn children at his altar, but you shouldn't, and here's why. I mean, he might as well have said, and you guys all think there's a Smurf living in your pocket, but there isn't, and I can prove it. So after he finished crushing all of science underfoot by talking shit about a really smart, crazy guy, he turns to the key issue of his talk, the thing that really bothers him about the skeptical movement. And that final point, I shit you not, was the fact that the skeptical movement had not yet put an end to all geopolitical conflict. And I'm barely exaggerating. His primary issue with skepticism is that it isn't focused on ending wars. So he wraps up his talk, 2 people clap 3 times apiece, and Jamie Ian Swiss, the MC, basically comes on with a shepherd's crook to yank this guy off stage. On the way off, he's yelling, if you have problems with it, comment on my blog, revealed the true purpose of his contrived contrarianism. It's all a desperate ploy to drive traffic to his blog, even if it's just going to be a bunch of people demonstrating beyond a doubt that he doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. Now, I've got to say, in the wake of his bloviations, Jamie Ian Swiss launched into a phenomenal rebuttal that won the audience back and really underscored what an idiot he was, starting with a long pause in the word oops. It was one of those, it was worth hearing the idiocy just so there could be a rebuttal type of moments. That might have been the single best moment at NECSS. So I'm not going to bother pointing out why virtually everything he said was stupid, wrong, or not even intelligible enough to be wrong. That's already been done. But I did bring this up for a reason other than just wanting to call this guy an asshole publicly several times. See, there actually is a problem in the skeptical movement that he accidentally touched on, and we have the same problem in the atheist movement. Ideologues see our movement, they see our numbers, they see our passion, and they want it for themselves. Right, at this point, we're facing a steady barrage of people like this, people who want to pick up our movement or movements and carry them over to whatever their pet issue is. This guy's pet issue was anti-war, and great, look, I'm not a big fan of people getting blown up either, but there's already an anti-war movement. It's a different fucking movement, and many of the people who are in the skeptical movement or the atheist movement are also in the anti-war movement. That doesn't mean either of those other movements should abandon what they're doing and focus on something else. You know, and I'm sure you can all think of multiple examples of this same shit from any number of issues. You know, a lot of people want to hijack the atheist movement for some other purpose, and most of the time it's like a really important, good purpose, right? You know, often there are issues that the majority of us can get behind and will get behind, but that doesn't make them atheist issues. What unites this group is our shared belief that religions are both wrong and harmful. And many of us might argue that pushing back against religion is anti-war, but that doesn't mean that we should give up fighting church-state separation and train all our guns on religious wars. Before he completely lost his fucking mind, C.J. Werleman was promoting a book about how you can't be an atheist and a conservative. That's fucking insane. Of course you can. And yes, in my experience, the vast majority of movement atheists are liberals, but that's not a prerequisite. I'm happy to welcome in conservatives. Shit, I can think of no better way to dilute the religious influence on American politics. And even though I might disagree with you on a lot of really important shit, that doesn't matter when we're teaming up on the shit that we do agree on. And at the same time, I'm happy to welcome in the most bellicose pro-war jingo you can dig up, too. Because if we're fighting together against X, I don't give a shit what you think about Y. And to be fair, look, I recognize this generally comes from a good place, even with John Horgan. I get it. Because we're generally pretty intelligent people. Most of us reasoned our way out of religion along the way. And when we find ourselves in a room full of other people who did the same thing, you know, other intelligent people who share our views on this, it's really easy to look around and think, well, these seem like some pretty smart people. They must also agree with me on all the other shit, right? So it's really easy to think that the atheist platform or the skeptical platform should naturally include all the other shit you're passionate about. But it doesn't. And more importantly, it shouldn't. The last thing we want is a bottleneck on the way into the tent. You can disagree with me about LGBT issues or safe spaces or geopolitical issues or economic issues or feminism or presidential candidates or whether agnostic atheist is a meaningful term. None of that prevents us from marching together against RIFRA or coaches leading public school students in prayer. Look, the strength of this movement will always be measured by its diversity. And if you find yourself allied with people that you disagree with, that's a good thing. You know, and if that bothers you, at least you can always comfort yourself with three things we can all agree on. There is no God, believing otherwise is detrimental to individuals and societies, and John Horgan is a misinformed childish jackass that looks like a high school wrestling coach that's been warned multiple times about long hugs.